Hi. No, you're good.
Or what?
No, mute. Nah, okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to someone. Okay, so trying to doing a bunch of posts go by, trying to catch back up. I was also in the middle of somewhere I have a half written. I have a I have a tab somewhere where I was responding to what to do about HA, and I didn't finish typing it, and now I've lost the tab.
Yeah,
I'm
but
trying to find it. Oh no, where'd it go? Well, so anyhow, basically, HA proxy, all we need to do is what we did before. We just need to build an image that has a dummy config in it, so it won't crash. And then you can send sig-hup, and the official docs on the image basically say to do this, though they're expecting that you'll make an image with your actual config. So I tell you to do like from their image, copy your config in, and then run that.
but with the HE proxy inside the G proxy or how?
Like you're supposed to here. Let me link it in the.
Because I tried all the.
So we actually already had this working, and then we, for whatever reason, we decided I don't remember why we decided we didn't want this, but
Yeah,
it
but
was fun.
this is the thing. This image, the problem that I understood is that once you put the node with the image, it died because it doesn't have a
So you need to take this image and make a custom image where you add a dummy config enough that it won't die, and then you can write over that config and send a sig-hup, and it will reload the config.
Yeah.
We already implemented that. We just need to go back and like bring that back, and we need to add health Z checks.
But this is the only thing that I found that it worked. Also, this guy, Eros Libre, is the one that has a working HE proxy configuration with the health endpoint. Because I tried Envoy, I tried the other ones, and they don't seem to have health checks for an SSL API.
I don't know about that for sure. Yes, I'd love to see that. I'm just running through the agenda items in the doc.
Hi, Patty.
So I'm not sure about that, but I know that there are other projects that switch to this to solve this problem. So we should be able to check that. We can look at what CubeSpray is doing. In theory, that I spoke to them, and that's why they have Nginx and HA proxy. They added HA proxy to solve this problem.
The only option within Nginx is to try or the paid version or the one with.
We should.
You need to have it in some modules, but it's difficult to maintain.
I spent some time looking at this this weekend. We should not use Nginx for this, and I believe it should be possible to get proxy working. And the issue of it will exit without the config is trivially solvable by we just publish our own image that adds one. If you dig back through the PRs, we actually briefly did that when we were switching. We can basically just bring back that implementation.
Yeah, well, that's I can. For me, it's okay. I think that is the most straightforward solution and the best solution.
Yeah, looking around, I think it's what everyone's using that's actually doing this successfully. There might be some people using Envoy, but I took a look at that, and if you're not actually programming Envoy dynamically, it doesn't look. It doesn't look necessarily better for this problem, and it looks much more, the config is much less straightforward.
Okay, perfect. So
IPv6, right? So I need to follow up on your new PR over the weekend with the config thing. So we're also going to need to account for one further thing, which is actually taking in each node's inputs, because there's some other stuff that we're going to want per node that needs to be config anyhow. So this is just a good change to figure out and make and get config working. We're going to want join configuration for each node soon, so that we can actually specify some stuff. I didn't get this on the agenda, so I will punt till after Patrick's demo if we have time.
but this is
to propose something that needs that anyhow. Yeah, so I guess I don't think we need to talk too much about these here. I will go back and review those again later today. I think we've generally got the right approach there. Once we get rid of the needing to override the drop-in, the IPv6 PR is mostly, I think, what we want. And then we can move forward there. You can see what
do you mean?
This is about kubectl versions. Yeah, I think I can. I think we can review that later. We don't need to do that in the meeting. Do you want to do your demo, Patrick? And then I'll come back. I'll type up. I need to add an entry for.
Yeah, sure. Let me get this shared out. So basically, I was just doing a quick experiment over the weekend since there was that new Windows subsystem for Linux 2 that was just released.
Yeah.
So hold on. Let's see if I do. Is that coming through?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, and now you should see something completely different.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
One second. This is the one that comes with is the new version, the one that comes with the full Linux kernel.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I'll type up more directions on how to actually get to this point later. Mm-hmm. But like right now, I took what was the Debian distro, and I said converted to version 2.
Cool.
And so that's going to invoke the new code here. So if I go and tell to run Debian, it's actually bringing this up right now. And we can see that the kernel version says, Microsoft Standard. Mm-hmm. So this is the kernel that was shipped with this Windows Insider release. And right now I'm running this on my 3-year-old laptop, so it's only got the 2 cores there. Mm-hmm. But if we look at it, I didn't set any particular memory limit on this, but it will let me basically use up to all the memory that's on the system. So rather than like Docker for Windows, where I had to go in there and pick how much memory I wanted to reserve for it, this basically, I don't know exactly how it works behind the scenes, but it seems to just be able to page stuff in and out as needed.
That's really cool.
So if I go over here and just run, so I'm using the same Linux version of kind. I put it in user bin local because I'm kind of old school that way. And then the version of Docker that's installed is just whatever the get.docker.io script installed. So I think it's, 1906 CE or something like that.
Cool.
So it looks like that stuff was already cached.
So does this work, or are we waiting for it to crash?
No, this is going to work.
Great.
And so what's funny here is while this is going, if I bring up Task Manager here, so I can just show you how you can tell it's operating differently under the hood here. If I go down here, I'm looking for, there's this process here called VMM.
Yeah.
And so this is actually like, I don't know how to describe it. I think it's like a fake process, but this is basically showing how much memory is being taken away from the Windows operating system and given over to this, like lightweight Linux VM that's running there.
Right. And we can also see that it's eating, what, a core?
Yeah, basically. Which, I mean, I don't know if that's typical for what Kind is doing right now.
Right. It is.
I should have done verbose so I could see if it was extracting or not.
Uh-oh.
What it failed to create cluster?
It failed to get the C group mounts. We may have some.
What's the Docker process running? Is it running inside Windows or inside Docker?
No, it's running inside Linux here.
So the network is the Linux network. That could be logs.
Yeah, and actually, let me show you something here.
Well, this mix of PowerShell with
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Actually, I can just show you right here. If I go over to the Performance tab, I can see that I've got a separate VNIC with its own MAC address for the WSL instance, but right now it's behind a NAT. And so I think that depending on the networking scenario, I'm going to check and see if there's a way I can get it to run without a NAT, because I may need to do that if I want to join another physical node. Because one of the things I wanted to test out was doing a kubeadm join on yet another Windows VM or on like my ROC 64 to get ARM64 nodes running.
I think based on that error, the C group mounts on the host are messed up.
Okay. Can you restart the Docker daemon?
Whatever that is.
Because it happened to me with the Docker, whatever, Docker machine. The Docker daemon was messing with the.
I'm also seeing there's some reference to maybe like not installing that and installing the like one that's packaged with the distro.
Yeah, what was weird is this worked the first time I tried it last night, and then I destroyed the cluster this morning.
Yeah.
But anyway, I need to do some more work and get it documented, but I think it shows some promise in that to get this started up, I don't have to go and find a big free block of memory on the system in order for it to actually be able to bring up a cluster.
Yeah.
I didn't find a version of Docker from within this Debian distro, but I could try switching to Ubuntu 18.04 or 19.04 and see if that works better.
Yeah, I will. This is pretty cool. Do you have any idea when this is going to roll out to like be just a standard thing that you can enable, or?
I'll have to check when this next release is, because this is currently in the insider preview, and I don't know if that's scheduled as like a preview of the fall release or next spring.
Okay.
I'll have to dig through the blog and find those details out.
So pretty related to this, Duffy Cooley reached out a while back about the idea of doing a tutorial session in San Diego for like developing Kubernetes locally. I've been debating doing that, and like this would be a very nice way to bootstrap and potentially for anyone using a Windows laptop.
Mm-hmm.
I will have to poke the both of you if I get any further on that proposal.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about it offline. Oh,
Yeah.
now that's interesting.
The meeting room phone here is getting a call.
Oh, interesting. So I could like copy and paste my kube config from the WSL2 instance into my Windows host if I wanted to. Huh. Okay. But anyway, once I get this working, I'll get some steps there. So the main docs site that you have here, that's under the kind.sigs.kh.io. Is that just published as like GitHub pages off your repo?
It's Netlify, but yeah, it comes off of the repo. So there's just there's a site contenter that has the actual content.
Okay. So if I made like a subsection on Quick Start or a separate page with the steps for setting that up, does that make sense, or would you rather have it someplace else?
Yeah, if it's really brief, I would just put it kind of inline. If it's like a couple of maybe we want a really detailed guide for setting this up, then maybe in the quick start we have like a link out to another page, and there's like an overall like user guide heading that has like a couple of pages in it now, and I'm planning to add more. This would probably be a great page for that.
Okay.
It should be really easy. Potentially, if you want, the absolute easiest way to iterate on this is just if you send pull requests, Netlify will render it, and there'll be like a link in like one of the contexts, and you can just do it there. So that's like the least effort way. The next one, least effort is it's built with Hugo, so you can like run against it. We pushed forward. Kind is actually the first site to get this sorted out. We pushed forward to it's using the stack from the Kubernetes main site docs, but for stuff that doesn't necessarily belong there. And just a different template.
Yeah, but it's Hugo, so that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of it's going to be the same. It's not as fancy as the site setup for Kubernetes, but kind of similar flow.
Yeah, but since the table of contents stays on the left, I like it better.
I hand rolled that template because I couldn't find the doc site template. It needs a little work, but it's okay.
Okay. Cool. Well, I'll keep you updated as I get more info.
That looks very promising. Well, if anything, I'd be worried that we won't need containers anymore if we can just make VMs magically grow their memory. So I don't know if all gets written up. I can type more of this later. So I've been thinking about the issue where you need to run a service in the cluster and serve traffic to it, and what we can do to make that work well. And there's like a bunch of options for this. But I think actually the most straightforward and stable thing to support is just to let users have more port forwards. That's going to work everywhere. It doesn't have any extra overhead. It's on Docker to support that, which is great. But the trick for this is going to be in the multi-node world in particular, you need to know, how do I make my workload run on a node that actually has the host port being forwarded to the actual host, right? So if we let you specify like for this extra port from here to here on a node in the config, ideally you don't have to like say predict the node name. I was thinking about how we actually do this with real bare metal clusters, and the answer is you would label that node and maybe even taint it to say, this node is where I'm actually sending ingress traffic from the rest of the world, and I want to schedule an ingress nginx set on this labeled node that actually has the appropriate port forwarded to it. Like if instead of using Docker port forward, I'm doing this at home and I'm like natting with my router, right? I'm gonna say, okay, the router is pointed at this machine and it has port forward, put a label on it, and then you can schedule the ingress controller to actually run on that node. So what you need then is you just need to be able to match up labels to nodes in the config. So I propose pretty simple. On the node objects in the config, we let you specify labels and taints. We propagate that through to Kubeatom's join configuration down to the kubelet args. And then we allow you to specify additional port forwards. On top of that, you can deploy things like the SOX proxy or whatever. But for the simplest case of just like, I'm a user that wants to run a web server in a one node cluster, you just need to specify the web server port forward and run with like host network and on the web server pod, and that's it. If you're in multi-node, then you can add the label and taint or whatever you want, and then schedule something like ingress nginx onto that machine and forward to your pods. And that will work properly. And you won't need to like do something horrible like map it to the node name and guess the node name or something like that. And like in general, this could be useful for testing. I spoke to various potential internal users, and one of the things that came up is when they're running multi-node and they want to do multi-node testing, even if they're not on something like GKE, they kind of make node pools by like labeling like these nodes are for stateful workloads and these nodes are not. So if they want to run the same manifests and keep those on different nodes to get more similar behavior to their production deployment, then they're going to want labeling them. You could accomplish this right now by doing this by hand in your own script after it boots, but I think we should just add it to the config, because then whenever we have some advanced stuff like the mounts, the extra mounts or the ports, you can, label a node to say, I can know that it has the persistence bind mounted through or this extra port or whatever. I think that's a pretty common first class thing to support in deployers, is saying, make this set of nodes with this label on it. And there's a reason that like kubelet supports doing this. The alternative is, without adding those super first class, we can just add support for patching a per node config, and you can jump through the hoops of configuring a Kubeatom config patch that accomplishes this. But the UX for that's going to be pretty bad, and this is a common enough feature, and for common enough settings that we think kind should be aware of. We've been doing top level fields, so I think we should probably just do a top level field for this. And I think that actually solves like most people's problems with, I'm running some service and I want to talk to it from the host. We can just have an example config that's like, here for like port 80, deploy ingress nginx, good to go.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, if you only want to port forward one service, you can do with node port, and you can
not on Mac without this.
No, I mean with node port, you don't need to be aware of node. You can pick whatever node in the role in the cluster.
But
so for services, it's straightforward. You don't need to label any node. You just need to forward one of the nodes in the cluster.
But so with node port, we don't know which port. I'm talking about something where like so pretend this is bare metal and you needed to solve this on the firewall. The most trivial way to solve this is on the router, you NAT a port, map it to the machine.
Yeah.
And you run ingress nginx on the matching host port, and then you use traffic. So then you just need to know this machine is the one that's being forwarded. Now you replace the router with Docker for Mac, which is doing the proxying, and you replace the bare metal machine with a kind node, and you've got the same thing.
Okay. Because this is for ingress controllers, not for services.
No, I mean, so you would get to your service by way of this, and then if say you want to be able to access everything and you're happy dealing with SOX and stuff, then you can deploy this SOX proxy against this, right?
No, that is not the SOX. It's what I'm trying to understand is I think that the service is exposed in all nodes. Then it goes to kubeproxy, and kubeproxy forwards to the.
Right. So
So
we're
I
talking
to
about,
understand why we need to select one node in the cluster. I think that every node in the cluster is going to forward the traffic to the corresponding pod.
Because we're talking about you being able to deploy things like egresses and whatnot, and for that,
Okay, yeah, that's the thing. Okay, so it's for everything. Yeah, well, I think that's the
because
best.
you can use this to forward anything, right? Like you don't necessarily need the labels for that stuff, but you're going to need it for scheduling against the host port directly, which is
Okay,
which
and
is a
then
reasonable thing to do.
so then you
So it's the most flexible. And what my point was that we can reuse this label and taint stuff to test some other things where you want to have like sets of nodes for different things.
who is going to forward the port? How do you do the forward?
Like this is at cluster creation time, you specify on the node
Okay.
port for it. And CRI has a concept of this. So we can kind of lift that concept.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah.
And then say, okay, you can specify a port for it on a node, and then we will simultaneously give support for you can like label and taint the node, so you know like this is my port forwarded node. I want stuff.
But then you add this to the API.
Right, to the kind API, and
That would be great.
And we could actually, like I say, we could do this without first-class support for most of it. We need first-class support for the extra port forward, and I think we might as well do it for label and taint just because those are pretty awkward. The way that you would do that now is they're kubelet flags only, not config. So you'd need to like patch kubelet extra args in the kubeatum config, and that's not ideal. And it doesn't look like they're moving to a proper config object at any point. So we can just add a field and plumb that through and hide that.
And so just to recount, so the label's needed so that way you can make sure that the ingress controller runs on that specific node.
Right. So like whichever, like, and you could have a bunch of nodes with different port forwards too, and you could say like, I'll run this ingress with this port and this ingress with this port and this ingress with this port or whatever, but they need to match up. And this solves, I'm not sure about the WSL2 stuff or how that's going to work.
Yeah.
But pre-WSL2, Blocker for Windows has the same problem where like it's boxing traffic and like you don't have like an IP to do funky routing to or anything because they just don't expose one. They actually run some kind of proxy between the host and the
that makes sense. And that was what I was just referring to earlier. I was looking at the IP. So cool.
Because for Linux, this has been solved for a long time, and you just like, sure, I'll just hit the IP. But a lot of people are using this on Mac, and I want the same workflow to work everywhere. So I think just being able to forward a port always made sense. The problem was always like, what's the UX for that once you go past one node? And I don't know why we went against labeling and tainting before, but I looked around and like most mature deployers support that. It's a very useful thing to be able to do to say like this node has some label on it for some dedicated scheduling. And you want that right away. So should be straightforward to add this. And it will dovetail into the work that you're doing, Antonio, to get like we need to do config per node.
Yeah, I changed it totally the pull request because I really didn't know what's the best way. So I thought that you couldn't mix the join and the init configuration.
You
but
can.
Now
it will complain, but it will ignore them.
Yeah, well, I didn't know it. So I redid the pull request, and the problem is that there are a lot of parameters we need to review going through to the templates because it's working, but I need to review all of them.
The other thing that this is going to solve is better support for mixing Kubernetes versions, which is something that we want to do for testing at some point. If we're actually going through the process of taking those inputs and mapping it through that one internal command that picks based on the Kubernetes version, the template, and generates the equivalent configuration, then we should be able to have an easier time doing something like this node is using this image with this Kubernetes version, and this node is using this image with this Kubernetes version.
I think the Fabrizio has something with kind of something similar with different versions.
Right, but they're using totally different logic for the actions and stuff because that's been too unstable internally in kind. But yeah, so this should all come together pretty nicely, and I think all of the other ways that you can, approach can kind of be built against this. Like even if you wanted to build some kind of thing for dynamically forwarding arbitrary things, you could still tunnel it over having a port opened up. So this seems like the simplest, most straightforward option to solve people's problems. I would like to build this out. We're pretty close to our next release, but I think we have enough time. It's not a super complicated feature.
No, because once we have the templates, it's just, well, the port forwarding is easy.
The port forwarding, the main thing is we need to port over that CRI type and plumb it through. That'll be a little bit of work, but not a ton.
But are you going to add it to this V1 Alpha 3 API?
Yeah, because it's a non-breaking addition, so we don't need to. And so that's another thing I would have liked to discuss, but I think we need to talk to more people, is kind is coming up on about a year, and the config mostly seems pretty stable. We're just adding things. I am, I think, planning to propose moving to beta soon. I don't think I think we can meet the requirements for beta to not break people. The logging change is one of the last ones that technically is going to violate that because of the flag change. So I want to slip that one in. And then once we've slipped that one in, I can't think of anything else where we definitely want to tear out and replace anything that's at the command line or the config level. Instead, we're going to be adding stuff like the port forward or changing internals that are not specified, what's in the node image is unspecified other than it boots Kubernetes.
Yeah, but before going to beta, I suggest that you select some internal functions and methods and these things to add unit tests because it's growing too fast, the project. And,
select what before beta?
To choose some things that need unit tests, to avoid regressions. I mean, there are internal methods and objects and functions that we should
do it, but it shouldn't be a blocker. Because the other thing is with Kubernetes, obviously all this is taken in good faith that you don't intentionally break things once you go to beta, but that doesn't prevent bugs from happening. And if they do, then you revert and patch back. But Kubernetes has this happen occasionally where there's some breaking change to the API service that's not quite intentional. And there's some room around that, like security bugs or things. The CV with config maps is an example of that, where they used to be writable, and that wound up being a security problem, and that had to be changed. I believe that was a GA thing, but it's still changed because there's still some wiggle room on things have to change. Especially because it wasn't something that was actually specified as you were supposed to be able to do this. It just happened that you were.
Well,
I think kind should be in the same boat. We should not break. We should not need to intentionally break things like the config format at this point. I don't believe. Also, beta does allow you to eventually change it. You just need to keep around for a while. So I think we should be good to there's nothing that jumps out about the API service right now. The biggest one I can think of is actually that logging flag is very logger specific. And as far as I can tell, to get into the ecosystem, Klog is just suck it up and use Klog. Everything is using Klog, and we are making it shimmable for library consumption to not have to use Klog.
Okay.
So yeah, I will post something to the repo as well to track this and make sure that anyone else can comment. Yeah, so I will type up some more of that so that we have notes.
To wrap up for 0.4.
Yeah, so I'm hoping we still have time, I think, to land these clean up to how we do config per node, and then probably hopefully still IPv6 doesn't seem particularly at risk. I think most of the other features like node restart, I'm still kind of hesitant about how we've implemented that, and I want more time to review. I think we can punt most of the stuff else that's in it out to 0.5, and that's pretty important. And I will hope to try to slip in the log cleanup so that we can even think about potentially 0.5 being where we go to beta once we deal with restart, maybe.
Okay. Well, I need the people with experience in the templates with kubeadmin to review the pull request with the configs. They are working in the pull request, but I don't know. I took some approach. So, for example, everything has a control plane endpoint.
Cool. Yeah.
Theory is only used for load balancer, but if you have only one node, it's you know the one node is the control plane endpoint too.
Right. I will take a look at that. Later today, I will have another meeting after this, but after that.
No, I'm not saying I don't need to rush, but the thing is that I don't have experience with the templates, and I need to check that everybody check. And with IPv6, I was reviewing again, and
yes.
in theory, the code now is only check if it's IPv6, it change the IP address that is passes as parameter of the function or the method. No. In theory, all the methods are IPv6 and IPv4. They don't branch. They don't do different things depending on IPv6 or IPv4.
Cool. And
but well, as I told you,
once dual stack is a little more formalized.
Yeah, but I'm following.
Attempting to leave room for it, but it's still kind of pretty undefined so far.
I'm following the dual stack review and the pull request, and so everybody has the same problem. How do you deal with this, duality? I don't know. Nobody can anticipate.
Right. But hopefully we'll figure it out, and that will be another neat thing to be able to test.
I don't think that is going to be merged soon.
Right.
So right now, they are only going to merge the dual stack pod thing.
Okay.
That for kind is not a problem. No, not a problem. Okay. Well.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for coming. I think we can probably end early. I will clean up the notes here a bit to cover a bit more of this, and see you all next time.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for coming. See you.